Hello, it's Tainus Esther, the day before Purim, so let's review some of the laws of Purim and learn one more halacha in the Mishnah Berurah. For those of you who are joining us after we learn a few of the halachas before the upcoming holidays, so this will be the last class about the laws of Purim, and soon we will start the laws of Pesach, the laws of Passover. So if you're interested in getting an email of a class a few times a week, please send me an email at Shaul Rosenthal, ShaulRosenthal @gmail.com. And today's class is in loving memory of Elchanan ben Leib, Edward Rosenthal. So let's first discuss some of the mitzvahs on Purim. So the first mitzvah, which is going to come tonight on the day of Purim, the night of Purim, is to hear the Megillah. There's a mitzvah to listen to every word of the Megillah read from a scroll. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that later when we do the Mishnah Berurah. And there's a mitzvah to hear the Megillah in the morning, tomorrow morning. Okay. Now, another mitzvah, you have to hear every word of the Megillah. It's important to hear every word, so we don't read along with the reader. We follow along in the Chumash, but we don't read along ourselves. We want to hear every single word from the person reading from the scroll. If anyone in the area or needs help finding a place to hear the Megillah, please feel free to reach out. Now, there's another mitzvah called Matanos Levyonim. We give gifts to two poor people. Now, and the money is distributed specifically on Purim. And if you are looking for a person to, many of the rabbis in town will be distributing the money to poor people on the Purim day itself. And talk about people that don't have enough to support themselves. So if you would like to donate to that, if you need to get in touch with someone to donate to that, please be in touch. Now, how much you have to give? So, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, he says you just have to give to each person the value of a roll and coffee. So as of last year, I looked into it. The cost of a roll is about 80 cents, and a medium coffee is $1.89. So you could technically fulfill the mitzvah with $2.69 each to each poor person. So $2.69 times 2. Rav Forsheimer says you could fulfill it with $1 a piece. Rav Eliashiv, let me just check here. Right. And actually I have here, Rav Chaim Kanievsky says you can give 2 cents or 8 cents about a pruta. So that's if you want to fulfill the basic, just fulfill the mitzvah, just get by the skin of your teeth. But it's generally nice to give more if you are able. But technically you can fulfill the mitzvah with a couple dollars a piece. Okay, so that's one mitzvah, Matanos Levyonim. The other mitzvah is Mishloach Manos. And Mishloach Manos is you send 2 gifts, 2 pieces of food, readily prepared food. You don't want to send someone a piece of raw meat. You don't send something that you have to prepare. You send something that can be enjoyed right away. And you send 2, the minimum requirement is to send 2 gifts to one person. So Matanos Levyonim, you're sending 1 gift to 2 people, or the amount of one meal to 2 people, and Mishloach Manos, you are sending 2 gifts or 2 foods to 1 person. But again, that's just the minimum requirement, and it has to be something. The way the Aruch HaShulchan says it, it has to be chaticha roi lischabed. It has to be something that is dignified, that you're giving to the person according to his honor. So if you just give somebody like a lollipop, I think the Art Scroll said if you just give someone a lollipop taped to a bottle of grape juice, really. You really do not fulfill. You really do not fulfill the obligation. Okay, and then the last mitzvah of Purim is to have a festive meal on the day of Purim, not on the evening of Purim. And by the festive meal, it should be a fleishig meal with meat to celebrate the miracle that happened. And at the meal, there's a mitzvah to drink Ad lo yada ben Aror Haman Lebarach Mordechai. You drink to a point where you don't know the difference between Mordechai, the hero of the Megillah, and Haman, the villain of the story. And the Ramah writes that the way you can fulfill this mitzvah is by, during the meal, drink a little bit of wine, and take a nap. Because when you're sleeping, you don't know the difference between Baruch Mordechai. I can't mess up now. I haven't even drank anything yet. Between Baruch Mordechai and Ar Haman. So you don't have to get drunk to the point where you don't know what's going on. You could just drink a little bit and then take a nap to fulfill the mitzvah, according to the Ramah. So that was just a quick review of all the mitzvahs of Purim. Now again, this is not, by no means what we just talked about is an extensive discussion of all the details of all the mitzvahs that can be performed on Purim. But in general, we have the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah, which is tonight and tomorrow morning. We have the mitzvah of giving gifts to 2 poor people, the mitzvah of giving 2 items of food to somebody, mishloach manos, and we have the mitzvah of having a festive meal where we should wash, have meat, and drink a little bit of wine. If we can, take a nap. Okay, so now that we reviewed the mitzvahs of tomorrow, let's continue with the Mishnah Berurah, the code of Jewish law. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the mitzvah of hearing Megillah that we're doing tonight. So we left off, we're in Tafresh Tzadi, which is 690 in the Mishnah Berurah. If you have one, you can follow along, or you can just listen. And we are on Daled, number 4. So we're talking about at the time of listening to the Megillah. So you have the Chazan, you have the Balkori, the person reading the Megillah. And it says, Misha Tovas Biyad Megillah She'enik Sher. Let's say, at the time of the Megillah reading, you're holding a Megillah which isn't kosher. Right? A Megillah has to be written a certain way, similar to how a Torah is written. Lo Yikra Im Shliach Tzibor. So you should not read your non-kosher Megillah along with the Balkora, the one who's reading it for the synagogue. Ela Shomei V'Shosek. You should just listen to the Megillah and be silent. Right? Some people, when they're laning, they read it to themselves out loud. That should not be done with the Megillah if you have a non-kosher Megillah. Nobody in the congregation should help the Chazan by speaking to him and telling him what to say, telling him the words. We'll see why soon. There are certain verses in the Megillah that we read aloud, that the entire congregation reads. The Chazan, even though the whole congregation reads those verses aloud, the Chazan, the Baal Koreh, has to go back and read those verses again. So now let's see in the Mishnah Berurah what the reasons are. Lo Yikra, why can't you read from a non-kosher Megillah along with the Baal Koreh? Lo Yikra, the Shema Yitin Hashamei Libo Lezeh HaKoreh, because maybe somebody in the congregation is going to listen to you reading from a non-kosher Megillah, and he's not going to listen to the Baal Koreh. And the mitzvah is to hear the Megillah from a person reading from a kosher Megillah. Except the people in the congregation got confused, and they're listening to you, and you're reading from a non-kosher Megillah. So you shouldn't do that. According to this, if you're only reading for one person, then he says you could read it from a non-kosher Megillah or a chumash if there's only 2 people there. Why is that? Because they're not going to get confused, right? If it's just someone reading the Megillah for you and you're reading with him in a non-kosher Megillah, then he's not going to get confused. But there are those that are stringent in every case. The person who's reading his non-kosher Megillah isn't going to be paying attention to the person reading the kosher Megillah. So we're saying, in the end of the day, the proper procedure is when you're in the congregation and you have a non-kosher Megillah, or you just have a chumash, don't read along, just listen. So don't read along and just listen. A person shouldn't help the Chazan, the Baal Koreh, by reading anything. The reason is, God, for the same reason that people are going to get confused. They're going to listen to you and not listen to the person reading the Megillah. Look at the Eli Rabbah, the Mitzadi Gam Bezelahach, where you should also be stringent with this. Even when you are just exempting one person from the obligation. Perhaps he's going to listen to you what you're reading himself. Right? Even if someone's reading for you alone and you're trying to help him, so it could be you're going to miss, if you're trying to help him and saying certain words, you're going to miss certain words that he said. We said that the Chazan has to read over the psukim. Right? Same reason Hamasai dekar al peh ube'emasarch likroso lechatchila kulam niksav. Ken gam bezet sarach echaz lachshav likroso mitoch chulak shera. Vehem yichav nilatzis bekriyasa kedei shia kula mitoch haksav. So the reason that the cantor, the Balkore, reads those verses again that we read as a congregation was the same reason, because the mitzvah is to hear the entire Megillah from the person who is reading it from the kosher Megillah scroll. And if you were just reading it from the Chumash, those verses, even though you read it already, lechatchila, the preferred practice is to hear the entire Megillah from him. Tzarech Chazan hainu lechatchila. Right, so he's saying that it's lechatchila, that it's preferred practice that the Balkore has to go back and read those verses that everyone was reading together. But if he did not do it, one still fulfills the mitzvah of reading the Megillah. So again, we went over the mitzvahs that have to be done on Purim, and we just learned that when a person is listening to the Megillah tonight and tomorrow, if he doesn't have a kosher Megillah with him, to not read along with the Chazan, but just to follow along quietly and listen. And as we mentioned before, if you miss a word, then you can read that word from the Chumash and you fulfill your obligation. But definitely preferred practice, initially one should not read along every word with the Chazan and the Balkor. And again, this class was Li'iloi Nishmas, in loving memory, for a merit for the soul of Elchanan ben Leib, Edward Rosenthal, my grandfather. And if anyone is interested in getting our classes on Passover, please send me an email, send me a text, please reach out. I'm wishing everyone a very, very happy Purim.